All right, I think maybe you could start us off with how you got your start at Loki Productions.
Yeah, when I was when I was in high school, I graduated in 1966. But like a year before graduation, 1965, I was in art class and working on a project. I was making a model of Ray Harryhausen's moon calf from First Men in the Moon,
Uh,
and I had, as part of my school project, and I had my mold of it sitting up on the shelf in the classroom. And then another, on somebody else's class, art class, the same art class but at a different time, there was a person named Rick Baker,
oh
and
yeah.
he saw my mold. We didn't know each other at the time. He saw my mold up on the shelf, and he said, he asked the teacher, say, who made that plaster mold? Because that's kind of like the thing I'm interested in, making molds and making masks. And so our art teacher got us both connected back in 1965. So from then on, Rick and I were friends, and we were. I would go over his house, and he'd be doing makeups on me and making molds and making masks and stuff. And eventually, Rick
Huh.
got a job at Cloaky Productions, working in their art department. And then Rick told me about it, and I found out about that. And then Rick gave me Cloaky's number, and I called him up and got an interview there. Showed him some of my 8mm home movies that had animation in it. And then, like a couple of weeks after that, I was hired out of Cloaky Productions. So that's how that happened.
Huh. Cool. Wait, so that would have been 1968 that you were hired?
Yeah, it was. That was like in June of 1968.
Well, were they making Gumby then, or Davey and Goliath, or?
No, they were. Well, yeah, they were working on the last. When I started, they were finishing up on the last 6 episodes of the Gumby adventure, and so that was the first thing I did, was working on the last 6 episodes, and as not as an animator at that time, but as a prop maker. So I was making little props and various set pieces for the last 6 episodes of the
Huh.
Gumby series. And then right after that, we went into Davey and Goliath.
Cool. Well, do you have any specific memories from working on Gumby in 1968?
Yeah. The one episode that I remember working on was called the Foxy Box,
Oh yeah.
and I remember that. Yeah, I remember that because I made the Foxy Box prop for that. So, um, yeah. I was working on that, and then there was several other episodes which I don't remember the titles, but I was still making props for some of these other episodes. But that's the one I specifically remember, is the Foxy Box.
Huh. Cool. But you said that they started making Davey and Goliath, or at least the new series in 1968.
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
Right.
Interesting. Well, what would a typical day look like for you at the studio at that time?
Well, at first, I was in the 1968. I was still finishing up college at Pasadena City College, and I would go to college in the morning, in the first part of the day, and I would get out like around noon. So I would go to Cloaky Productions at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and work from like 1 till 5. So I was working for several months for just like half days, and so I would go strolling in at 1 o'clock in the studio and walk past Ruth Cloaky's office, which is on the left. Ruth Cloaky was Art Cloaky's wife, but they were
Hmm?
separated at the time, and Ruth Cloaky was running the studio. And then I come in, and just to the right was the art department. That's where I mostly hung out if I wasn't animating. So I'd come in and then check in, and then go all the way in the back of the studio was the stages, and I go back in there, and that's where we had like 5 or 6 animation setups set up at the same time. And I would go back in there, and then I would look at the storyboards and talk to Ray Peck, who was our animation director, and we'd see, what shots that were assigned to me and the other guys, and we'd go over the script and the shots, and then I'd go back and light my setup. I did my own camera work and lighting at that time, and lit my own setups and made the setups, and we'd have exposure sheets, animation sheets from editorial, where all the dialogue was broken down for our shots. Go over that with the director and editor in editorial, into what our assignment was and what our characters had to do, and then we had our storyboard script, of course, and then we go ahead and start animating. So that was kind of the typical day at Cloaky Productions.
Huh. Cool. Well, I've always heard that they started the new series for Davey and Goliath in 1970, but is that just when it aired, or were you just sort of gearing up? And
Yeah, that's an error. No, it was the new series again started in late 1968.
okay.
Again, just after we finished the Gumby series in July, August, like September or so in 1968, and then just right after that, late September or October, we started on the 1968 Gumby series, and that went through 1968 and 1969 and into early 1970. For Davey and Goliath was interesting because we were using actually nice stop motion armatures, metal
Oh yeah.
socket hinge armatures, whereas on Gumby mostly everything was wire armatures, except for some of the characters were metal ball and socket armatures. So we had a nice machine shop there, and actually Doug Beswick was not only an animator, but he, at this time on this new series, Dave and Goliath series, Doug designed a new style armature, which I talk about. I talk about all this stuff in my my history book, which is out on Amazon. But the Doug Beswick designed the new style armatures, which were very nice and had those machined and built. And so all our Davey and Goliath and other characters in this new series had all these new armatures in it, which made the animation much nicer
Oh
and
yeah.
smoother to deal with these new style armatures. So that was being done, and we had new artists come in. Ed De La Cruz, who is a Spanish artisan, and he came in and started building a lot of the new sets for us, which were amazing, very very nicely built sets that he had built. And so we had new sets built for the new series and new armatures, and the characters, of course, basically looked the same. And we were casting up, Davey puppets and Goliath puppets and other new characters, boys and girl characters for whatever parts that they played in the different episodes. And so, yeah, all this was happening, all this new stuff, and it was a great time. We had a crew of, a dozen or so of us there. There was four or five of us were animators. Sneaky Pete Kleino was one of the animators, and he had, of course, been there from the beginning, back in the 50 series. And then Doug Beswick was animating, I was animating, and Rick Baker was there, again, casting the puppets, sculpting various characters for even some sculptures of museum pieces, like this saber-toothed tiger that Rick had sculpted for one of the episodes. So yeah, there was a whole lot of stuff going on. It was a lot of fun, very very exciting for me, because it was my first job in the movie industry as Cloaky Productions. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Uh, Did you say that somebody was there since the 1950s Gumby series?
Oh no, I had mentioned that. Yeah, Sneaky Pete Kleino, who was one of the animators.
Oh,
He had been with Clokey Productions, animating from their very first series, which I think was like in the mid 50s, 1955 or 56, somewhere around there.
huh.
So yeah, and we became he became my best friend, and we had I'd met him there in 1968 because he was back in the 1968 series animating, and we became good friends, and we were good friends throughout the rest of the film industry.
Hmm. How many frames would you animate per day, like at the studio?
I don't remember going by. I don't remember what the frame count was, but I just kind of remember by seconds. We had a quota of getting each animator was supposed to get. I think it was like 20 seconds a day, something like that.
Whoa.
Again, I wrote about that in my book, but I think it was about 20 seconds a day. And that's double framing, so it's, we're
Oh,
increasing the amount by, double framing.
so that would have been 12 frames per second?
Well, no, the movie, the film ran at 24 frames. It was 24 frames a second. Is the frame rate for the 16 millimeter movies. But we, instead of shooting single frames, one frame at a time, we would shoot 2 frames at a time, and just to rack up the footage faster.
Oh, I see. Okay. Interesting. Well, do you remember ever repainting the Gumby Jeep to be a different color? Because the Jeep used on the Davey and Goliath show looks kind of like the Gumby Jeep, at least in terms of construction. So,
I really have no idea because I wasn't building those props.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I have no idea if it's the same Jeep and it was repainted or whatever.
Interesting. Well, do any props or characters still exist from that time, or are those mostly lost?
No, I did. I had well, not, yeah, I did. I had a witty witch. I had the actual witty witch character.
Really?
Yeah, I had. Trying to think what else. If I would have known what these questions would have been, I would have been more prepared.
I'm so sorry.
Well, I definitely had a witty witch character, which I sold. I still have this little bird character. I don't know what it's called, but this little yellow bird character. In fact,
Huh.
I have to look up and I have to look at some of the old series and see what some of these characters were from, so I can properly, name it and advertise it. I moved some of my props around. Oh, then I have this librarian lady. Let's see. I'm looking in my closet right now. Yeah, I have another character, this librarian lady.
Oh, cool.
If I probably sent you a picture of it, you probably might know what it was from.
Hmm.
And then I don't know. I had a lot of other little props and like paintings from some of the Davey and Goliath sets and Gumby sets where there were like some paintings on the wall, like in Davy's house.
Oh, cool.
I still have that, and then I don't know, a few other things. Yeah,
Wow.
but a lot of the stuff I've gotten rid of.
huh, interesting. Well, you also said that you worked on the 1980 series.
Yeah, 1988. Yeah. In fact, I was just writing about that in my current book. Yeah. Yeah. I was working at ILM, and late 1987, I got a call from Art Clokey saying that he was starting up on another Gumby series. There in Sausalito, which was not far from, just about 20 minutes from ILM in San Rafael. I said, "Wow, I can't believe it." I was shocked and surprised that I had. This is almost exactly 20 years later that happens again. That it's Gumby. First in 1968, now it's 1988. Here he is. I'm up in the Bay Area, and Art Clokey's moved up in the Bay Area, starting his Gumby series. So yeah, it was quite a shocking surprise to me.
So, but Art Lucky wasn't at the studio when you joined in 1968, right?
No. They were him and Ruth Clokey were separated, and his wife Ruth Clokey was running the studio, and Ray Peck was the director.
Okay. Well, what was it like working on the '80s series?
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun and strange because of just being back on Gumby again 20 years later.
Oh
But
yeah.
it was kind of nice because everything was updated. It was now they were setting up there in Sausalito. It was very interesting because they Art and Gloria Clokey had rented, or the network had, was probably paying for part of it. It was an old schoolyard in Sausalito, a grammar school, which they converted into a Primavision for this new series of Gumby shows. And so it was interesting because everything was the offices were in classrooms, the art department was in classrooms, and you go into these classrooms and the chalkboards are up there with writings on it, and all the school chairs and tables that students would sit in, all that stuff was still there. It was very strange and interesting. And then, of course, it was on a big schoolyard, and and then the basketball gymnasium was what they used for the filming studio to shoot the stop motion animation.
Oh yeah.
And so they had everything was set up. They had a prop department, they had a machine shop and a construction department, and everything was, all the characters were built and sets were built there in the schoolyard, and everything was shot there. And so it was weird. It was almost like being back in grammar school again, walking into the studio. But, we were all adults and working on this new Gumby series. So it was, quaint and strange and interesting.
Interesting. Well, do you have any anecdotes from working on the '80s series?
Oh, yeah, I do. You might gonna have to get that out of my book. um, I can't think about what that is right now.
Okay. Well, what was Art Clokey like?
Art, he was a great guy. He was a little strange because he was into this Hindu religion stuff or whatever back then in the earlier days. But now on this '88 series, I think he was a little more down to earth and um, actually, I think he had given some of that up. Actually, I think he actually gave his life to Jesus Christ. I think he became a born-again Christian, from what I can tell. And
Really?
so, anyway, he was very, very easy to get along with, and just easy to talk to. And he would always listen to your ideas and take your suggestions, and let everybody, contribute as much as they wanted to. And so he was never a tyrant. He wasn't a tyrant. He was very cordial and forthcoming with about how he had his ideas. The only thing that always had to be was that Gumby always had to be clay.
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, if I want to jump back to 1968, when we were working on that '68 series, Gumby, that Art would come in and out of the studio and bring his, sometimes his daughter and his son Joe Clokey in, and he'd to show his kids what was going on in the studio. And but we had made a stop motion Gumby, a Gumby that was made like a regular, stop motion character out of foam rubber and a metal skeleton.
Oh,
And we thought that was really cool because it would last, and he could be more. He could do like more things, and not have the clay mess up so quickly. And it would last a lot longer. And so there was a animation test done with that, which I think Doug Beswick did. And so we showed this to Art Clokey, and he looked at it and said, very interesting. And but Gumby has to be clay. That's what Gumby's all about. So
yeah.
I always remember that about Art, and trying to push a stop motion foam rubber metal armature Gumby on him, which didn't work out. But yeah.
Does that stop motion test still exist?
I have no idea. It was I don't know if where it is, if it does exist, or who might have it. So who
Hmm.
knows?
I think, didn't you also work on the 90s movie?
No.
Oh.
I worked on what, I'm not sure what that is. I worked on, maybe. I'll answer maybe. I worked when I was there working on the 1988 Gumby series. At the same time, at some time in there when the episodes are being worked on, Art wanted to do the Gumby movie, which he called, I think, Gumby 1.
Mm.
So I started on that. I did some animation on that. I did an opening shot with Gumby and a closing shot for that movie, and some other various tests. But by the time that really got into production, I was out of there and back at ILM. So I did a little bit of work on it, a little bit of animation, 2 or 3 shots. Let me back up a little bit.
Oh.
And then for the Gumby movie, I did. I had an optical company called Image Effects, and I did like about 30 opticals for Art on that, of compositing different things, Gumby into different shots, or compositing video images like on television screens, or the laser effects, because there was like a laser fight that Gumby was doing with
Oh, yeah.
somebody, and so there was there's the laser. He was only had a glow to it, so those are all optical effects that I did for the show. So yeah, I also did that on the Gumby movie.
Did you work on the 2004 Davey and Goliath movie?
No.
Okay, interesting. Well, how many frames were produced per day on the 80s series?
To tell you the truth, I don't really know. It wasn't not. We weren't cranking out as much footage like we did on the 1968 series because
Hmm.
we had a bigger budget and more time. So, but yeah, I don't. I could guess and say that maybe each animator is maybe putting out like 8 to 10 seconds a day. But the animation was single frame and higher quality.
Huh. Cool. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Well, one last question. What was your favorite experience, sort of working on Gumby and Davey and Goliath over the years?
Well, my favorite experience would be just back in this '68 series, because again, that was like when I just first started and got in the industry, so it was very exciting for me. So it was special because it was the first for me, and that's because I was learning a lot, not only the animation, how to animate, but to how all the stuff was built, how to build armatures, and how to cast foam rubber, the foam rubber casting expertise, making molds, and all of that was a big learning experience for me. So that was that would be then.